Kia ora Dame Margaret Sparrow, thank you very much for agreeing to have this interview to talk to me about your work within the reproductive and abortion rights campaign. I just briefly, I guess, a wee background about yourself, and because we're a Wellington Museum, we're Wellington stories, I'm just wondering if you could tell me what brought you to Wellington, because you weren't originally from here.
No, I was born in Taranaki, and I came to Wellington in 1953 to do a science degree at Victoria University, and I was in a student hostel, at Helen Lowry Hall, and I completed my science degree here in 55, and then I went down to Otago to do my medical degree, and then I went to Taranaki, worked in hospitals and the health department there, and then I came back to Wellington, and that was in 1969, and I joined the Student Health Service at Victoria University.
Great, well thank you. We'll come back to Victoria University, but I'm just curious actually about this, you doing a science degree and a medical degree. Were there many women doing that back then, doing science and medicine?
No, but I don't think we had very good careers advice at high school, and for some reason I chose to do science. I was more naturally inclined towards arts, but I did a science degree.
Oh, that's interesting.
And by doing a science degree, I also found, I didn't do it for this reason, but when I had done it, I found that if you did have a science degree, you had preferential entry into medical school.
Of course. Right. And that ended up being something you wanted to pursue, obviously into medicine.
Yes.
Why was that?
I met somebody that was my future husband, who thought that doing a science degree, and I'd done it with the intention of doing some sort of medical work, like medical laboratory work or something like that. That was my dream as a young girl.
Oh, okay.
And Peter persuaded me that why shouldn't I aim higher and do a medical degree.
Oh,
and all I had to do to complete the requirements, because I'd done the zoology and chemistry, all I had to do was a few sessions on science German.
Science?
German.
German, oh!
Reading papers, reading scientific papers in a foreign language.
Oh, right,
which I've never been able to do. But
right.
Anyway, that was the only additional thing that I had to do in order to apply to medical school.
Oh, great. Okay. So Peter was obviously a bit progressive and back then, so
yes.
would have been encouraging
yes.
you to be pursuing
yes.
a medical career.
Yes.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. So, Dame Margaret, so you then ended up at Victoria University in the Student Health Centre.
Yes.
Now, I understand that's how you became in reproductive rights.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Why was that? How did you end up heading in that direction?
Well, the students needed contraception, and at that stage, in 1969, the pill had already arrived. The pill arrived in 1961, but it was still not really available to young people, and the Medical Association at that time had an ethical ruling. It wasn't a law or anything, but there was just an ethical ruling that doctors should only prescribe the pill to married women. So that excluded a lot of students, and I thought this was wrong, and I became involved, but I didn't know a lot about it then because I hadn't had much training in contraception. One lecture.
Oh, true, of course.
At medical school.
Wow.
And so that was when I got in touch with family planning, because I thought I'd better find out more about this. I mean, I'd taken the pill myself. In fact, I was one of the pioneers, if you like. I was one of the first women in New Zealand to take the pill, because in 1961 I was having a year off then from medical studies, and I just had my second child, my daughter, in 1960. And so I was really the ideal candidate for the pill anyway, because I was married, I was young, I'd already had 2 children, and I think if I'd gone to a doctor, I would have qualified to try the pill anyway. But in fact, my husband Peter was doing general practice, not locums, studies. Just as part of your medical training, you will be attached to a general practice, and you'll learn about general practice. And he was in a general practice and came home with some free samples. So I lived on free samples
Of course.
for years, and never saw a doctor at all.
Oh, right, of
So
course. Yeah.
anyway, that's just to say that was my experience of the pill, and I'd had a good experience. I know a lot of women had nasty side effects because the pills in the early days were quite high strength.
Okay.
And but I was very lucky, and I didn't have any of those. It was my only familiarity with the pill, but I thought I'd better find out more about things, and that was also when I joined the Family Planning Association.
Right. Excuse my ignorance, Margaret, but when did the Family Planning Association get established? Was it a fairly recent thing, or?
No. That was established in 1936.
Wow, I didn't realise that.
Yes,
That early.
Yes.
Interesting.
Yes.
So they were up with the play then,
Yes.
in terms of the pill by the time you,
Yes.
1969.
Yes.
It's fond of a better word, but I guess if you were with students at young women at the Student Health Centre, it was the age of free love too, isn't it? Or whatever. Times were changing in terms of sexual freedom or sexuality, I guess. Very much so. So
yes.
you were there and you saw that probably, didn't you, happening?
Yeah.
So I guess was that a prompt for you to help the young women need access to contraception to be able to control their
very
fertility?
much. But also as a matter of rights, I learnt that the students were going up to Dr. Geiringer and Dr. Shand, who had a medical practice not far away from the university in Kelburn, and they were providing it free for students, and I just thought this was wrong. Here the students had paid their Students Association fees, and we were meant to be providing a medical service. But the director of the service at that time was a staunch medical association person, and felt that we should be abiding by the ruling, or the ethical guideline, not to prescribe to young people. So that was my first battle.
Sure. So you're instrumental in bringing about that change within the student health centre, that young women could have access to contraception. How did you do that? What did you do?
Well, I went to a family planning conference and came back with a whole lot of posters and samples, and we had a waiting room, and I was in charge of the information that went on the waiting room notice board. And so I did a very elaborate notice board after this conference. I think it was November 1970. And I came back with a lot of information, and the director didn't approve of it, but it got the message across to young people that you could ask your doctor for contraceptive help.
At the Students' Health Centre, right, sure. So you was that a bit of a battle, or did you win that easily enough, or was it a bit of a
it was a bit
fight?
Awkward for a while. It was no speaks for about 2 weeks.
Okay. But you weren't told to bring it down or to stop?
Yes, I was ushered into the director's office, and there was a pregnant pause where I was supposed to offer to take it down, but I didn't.
And you staunched them out. Well done. Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Bet the many young women at the university at that time thanked you for that. Yeah. So I guess I guess back then, I guess you would have come up with women wanting to seek an abortion as well. It was illegal then, wasn't it?
Yes,
Back then.
yes,
What happened there, Dame Margaret?
Well, it was quite slow for me to get involved because I wanted to be a nice doctor and I wanted to be, as ethical as I could be, and I knew that it was not easy to get a legal abortion in New Zealand, but I didn't want to do anything illegal. I mean, I had 2 children, and by this stage, Peter and I had separated, and I was a solo mother with 2 children. But I was lucky when I came to the university because I did have my widowed mother as part of the family, so she was able to help with being here when the children came home from school and helping with meals, and she was a very, very great support. I wouldn't have been able to do what I had done without the support of my mother.
Oh, great. Oh,
anyway, I've lost.
No, that's okay. Just access to a illegal. It wasn't illegal.
It happened very slowly, and there was a welfare officer at the student association a male who felt that the student body ought to be helping students, and so he was giving people addresses that somehow he had got, and I wouldn't have anything to do with this because I didn't know the abortionists operating in Australia. It was very difficult to get one in New Zealand, but he was giving them an Australian address, and I was in my office one lovely sunny morning and I got this telephone call from a young student in Melbourne. She'd been sent to Melbourne with an address just written on the back of an envelope sort of thing, and the address didn't even exist. And she was in tears and asking for help, and I just felt totally inadequate, really. I just sort of said, well, go to family planning. That was my best advice. But I didn't know anything about what services were being offered in Melbourne at that time, so I wasn't really able to help her.
Was abortion legal in there, or would it have been a backstreet abortion?
No, it changed in Australia before it changed here. In 1969, there was a big court case in Melbourne where a doctor who had been providing abortions was taken to court and accused, and the jury found him not guilty. And the same thing happened in Sydney 2 years later. In 1971, there was a similar court case where doctors operating in a clinic where lots of people knew where to go, and the law was a little bit vague because they were operating on what was called the Bourne decision, which was not an Australian or a New Zealand decision, it was an English decision where Dr. Harold Bourne had
about the Bourne decision.
The Bourne decision in England, where a reputable Dr. Harold Bourne had openly provided an abortion for a 14-year-old girl who'd been raped by three guardsmen, and the judge's ruling was that to force her to continue the pregnancy would have been unwarranted, and so this Bourne decision was one that was not applicable in New Zealand and Australia, but it was a ruling that gave people hope that if you stood up in court and could say that you were doing this for the term that the English judge used was a physical or mental wreck.
Oh right, yeah.
But if you could stand up in court and say that you had done this to protect the woman's health, you were sort of using that Bourne decision without it having any real merit in New Zealand. But in these two cases it worked. In 69 and 71, the doctors said that they were carrying out the abortion for the benefit of the woman's health,
right.
and the jury agreed. And then of course we had the same thing here in 1975, because in 74 the Auckland Medical Aid Centre had opened, and they brought over one of the Sydney doctors, Dr. Jim Woolnough, and he was openly providing abortions at the Auckland Medical Aid Centre in 1974, and the police raided the clinic a few months after it was opened, and there was a court trial. And one of the students at Victoria University, who was a patient of mine, was one of the cases in the Woolnough trial. There were 12 cases, 12 women, and the same thing happened as happened in Melbourne and Sydney, in Auckland. The first jury was a hung jury. They couldn't decide. But the second jury said not guilty. That went to the appeal court, and the not guilty decision was upheld.
Oh, great. Well, do you think that was all the kind of beginning of the movement to provide legal abortions here?
Very much.
It was.
Very
It was
much.
All
and the opposition saw that as well. They saw that the Woolnough ruling was going to do exactly what had happened in Melbourne and Sydney, in South Australia and New South Wales. Other parts of Australia were still very conservative, but obviously the same thing would happen here in New Zealand, and that's when the opposition really thought, okay, we can't trust the courts, we have to go to Parliament.
Yeah.
And that's where that really was the impetus for the movement to restrict the abortion laws here.
Okay.
And that led to the Royal Commission, and the law came in 1977. And last night not last night, it was the night before Tuesday night, we got rid of that 1977 law. We think we have. It's only the second reading,
isn't it?
But there's hope. There's a few amendments to go and a few debates to be held. But I'm hopeful that we're going to overturn that 1977 legislation.
So that means taking it out of the Crimes Act and becoming a health issue, a health and mental health.
Exactly.
Woman's choice.
Exactly.
Yeah, right. Excellent.
That was a bit off the track.
No, but we're never going to bring it forward. No, that's
you were telling me, how did I get involved in abortion with the students? And initially, as I said, I didn't get involved because I didn't want to. I didn't want to get anything that was semi or, not legal.
Sure.
And then the welfare officer came to me. His name was Mike, and he said, "Do you think you could do pregnancy tests before they go?" Because they'd had a woman who was worried, lost her period, thought she was pregnant, went to Australia, wasn't even pregnant.
Oh, right, sure, of course.
And that can happen.
Yeah, of course,
as you well know.
Yeah.
And so I said, the first thing I said was, yes, of course I could do that. And also, one of the other things I could do was provide antibiotics for them, so that they didn't have to spend that extra money, because in those days it was a big thing going to Australia. It
would have been.
It cost quite a lot.
Oh, yes.
And most of your contemporaries hadn't been on an overseas flight.
No, of course,
at
that's
that
right.
stage.
Yeah, true.
And so I was helping in that way, and then I thought, this is not right, and I got in touch with a director at Samaritans. I knew that sometimes they were dealing, of course, with youth suicide and also unplanned pregnancies. I knew that these were two of the things that they dealt with. And Valerie Scott was one of the directors of the at Samaritans, and she and I worked together. She was more help to me than doctors, because doctors didn't want to have anything to do with it. I think Dr. Guyring and Dr. Shen may have had some contacts in Australia, but it wasn't the sort of situation where I could say, let me know. And so with the help of Samaritans, we decided that instead of sending people to Australia with a false address on the back of a scruffy envelope, they should be going with a letter of referral, just as you would send a patient that you were sending anywhere with a letter of referral. This is not something to be ashamed of. This is a medical procedure.
That's absolutely right.
And you should go with a proper letter. So we had Samaritans was good in that they had legal advice freely available. That was one of the voluntary things that some lawyers did, was to help the organisation. And so we had free legal advice and started doing that. And I got the women to come back and tell me what had happened. Were they ripped off by the taxi people? Did they find it difficult to get accommodation? What was the service like? Would they recommend it? What happened? So that I got feedback, so that I could, and that's really so I gradually got involved, and then I became more comfortable and began sending people to Australia. And so that would have happened until May of 1974, when the Auckland Medical Aid Centre opened, so I began sending patients there.
Oh God!
Although they wouldn't accept every patient, they were quite strict in the early days, and I still had patients that I needed to send to Australia because they liked them to be, I think, under 10 weeks gestational age, and so I would still have to be referring those to Australia. But that's how I sort of started getting involved.
No, of course. Dame Margaret, out on the streets, I guess, if you like, women were protesting, for pro-abortion, for the right to access an abortion legally. Were you part of that social activism campaign?
Yes, I joined the Abortion Law Reform Association. I thought the best thing for a doctor is to be doing what I'm doing, and one of the other things that I haven't mentioned is that I became involved in providing emergency contraception.
Right, sure, of course.
We used to call it the morning after pill, to prevent an unplanned pregnancy. So I'd already been involved in that.
Right.
And so we had the what was I going to be talking about? I've lost the thread again.
There's a campaign happening at the same time.
The campaign
pro-abortion,
happening at that time.
Yeah.
There wasn't much protest activity so much in the early days. WONAC
WONAC
started. When did they start? Around about that time, anyway. And this is a woman's history that's worthwhile recording as well. They would be involved. I found my thread. What I was going to say was, I didn't so much feel that I had to be involved in the street protests, because the best thing for me to do as a professional was to back them up by providing things, and one of the best things I thought I could do would be to promote the emergency contraception or morning after pill, because nobody knew about it at that time.
Of course.
So that was what I did. and to provide them with contraception rather than be out in the streets. But I supported the people who were out in the streets at that time.
Oh, great. Okay, that's interesting. So, I guess coming forward a bit in time, in your view, what has changed from those times to now? I mean, we were both recently on a pro-abortion rally.
Yes.
But it's FemForce, I think, from Victoria
Yes.
University, feminist group, organised, and we marched down to Parliament to demand that came out of the Crimes Act.
Yes.
So do you think that it's been a big change, or has it been gradual, or has that taken a long time, actually, hasn't it? I guess you think about from 1977 till now.
Far too long.
Right, so in your view it's far too long, yeah.
And the reason I think is that to help patients, we made a bad law work. We knew it was a bad law. Right. It was complicated.
Right, yeah.
You had to get permission from 2 doctors. Yeah. You had to do this and that.
And it was all about mental health.
Yes, 98% done on the grounds of mental health.
Yeah.
Totally out of date because medical abortions weren't even dreamed of when the law went in. So they were not. The law was not written for medical abortions. It was only written for surgical abortions.
But sorry, what is a medical abortion?
A medical abortion is when you take the medical abortion pill.
Oh, a pill.
And you induce a miscarriage.
Ah,
and
of course.
That is now the choice for people rather than having surgery. Ah,
okay. Where did that come in?
Well, I was involved in the introduction of that as well. In 1999, 5 of us doctors who were very experienced surgical operators, we were all abortionists, and we knew that overseas there was a medical abortion pill, and none of the pharmaceutical firms here wanted to have a bar of it. Even Roussel, which was one of the companies who had developed the product in France. Okay. They had a subsidiary here in New Zealand, but they didn't want it because it was commercially, disadvantageous perhaps to their other products. So nobody wanted it. So the 5 of us got in touch with, we did a lot of research, and it was available in France, and it was available in China, and it was available through India, but we chose various. And it was already in the United States, but we chose to go through France. I won't go into the reasons why, and they said, "I'm sorry, we don't deal with doctors. We only deal with pharmaceutical companies." Right. So we just went down the road to a very friendly lawyer who signed some bits of paper, and for a very small fee we became a pharmaceutical company.
Oh, right,
and
excellent.
We called ourselves Ishtar Limited because, and that's spelled I-S-T-A-R, but you usually it can be pronounced as Ishtar, but usually it's pronounced Ishtar, and she was a Mesopotamian goddess of love and fertility and war.
Right.
And we thought she had all the attributes that we needed.
Excellent.
And so we formed our little company, and true to their word, they negotiated with us. I mean, we were the same people, but because we now were a pharmaceutical company, they negotiated with us, and it took us 2 years. We had to go through the usual process when you introduce a new medication. You have to go through the Ministry of Health, and I must say they were not in the least bit obstructive. They were helpful. They didn't fast track us or anything like that. They didn't give us any privileges, but they just treated it as a normal application. And I thought that was, very good.
That's great.
And we had, it first came into the country in 2001, but because of our silly law, the law says all abortions must be performed in a licensed institution, but nobody knew what that meant. Did it mean taking the first pill, the one that we'd imported, but that doesn't usually create an abortion in itself. is an anti-prostaglandin, so it stops the fetus growing and the fetus will die.
Right.
But it doesn't expel it very well.
I see.
So 24 hours later or up to 48 hours later, you take another pill, which is called a prostaglandin, and that induces contractions, and it expels the fetus. So it's a two-stage process. And because of our silly law, nobody knew whether it was when you took the first pill or when you took the second pill, and did you have to stay in a licensed institution. And we actually had to go to the High Court, and a judge jury made a ruling on that, and he said you have to take your first pill in a licensed institution, you don't have to stay there. You come back, you have to take your second medication in a licensed institution, and you don't have to stay there at all. So that was the ruling, but because the law was so unclear, we had to get a High Court ruling. And of course if the law goes through now, that has gone. So we no longer have to have a licensed institution to take the abortion pill.
So you can now, potentially, if it goes through, you can go to a pharmacy, buy the pill, take it at home on your own, and that's it?
That would be a dream.
Right, that's too medical.
You have to go through a health professional.
Oh yes, of course. Yeah. Right, still have to, sure.
And I don't think the health professional is a chemist.
Right. Yeah. No, you have to go to the doctor and then they prescribe you the pill.
Or a nurse.
Or a nurse. Oh yeah, sure.
I think a nurse who's got the qualifications. It has to be within her scope of practice, but if she's trained, I see no reason why a nurse shouldn't be involved in running a medical abortion clinic.
But hopefully it will be a lot easier to access, won't it?
Yes.
Would probably lead me to a question based around what are the challenges we still face today with reproductive rights or control of your fertility. Do you think, once maybe we have greater and easier access to abortion, then that's hopefully ticked off a bit. Yeah. Are there any other challenges?
Yeah, but I think going back to the first question, which was what are the changes? We talked about the changes in abortion, but and incidentally I brought up emergency contraception, which we now call it. Now.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But also there have been changes in contraception
over
that time.
Of course.
And the biggest thing that happened was HIV/AIDS in the early 1980s.
Yes.
And that made us have to be much more aware of condoms. And that got rid of another stupid piece of legislation that went through in 1954 after the Mason-Garb report.
Oh yeah, of course.
Which is a sort of
the delinquent youth up in the Hatton Valley. Yes, that's
right. And that was that you couldn't discuss or prescribe contraception for under 16-year-olds.
Okay.
And when AIDS came along, it meant that we couldn't promote openly condoms because under 16-year-olds might hear.
I see.
And so Helen Clark got rid of that one.
In the 80s?
Was section,
must have been right.
Yes.
Okay.
And so I think HIV and AIDS changed things for a lot of people. It made us much more aware of the value of condoms in preventing transfer, and emphasised the safer sex principles that had been there all the time, but we'd sort of not been as careful as we could be. And I think there's also been changes in other ways in contraception, and we're still getting changes. Like last November, after many, many years of campaigning, the hormone-releasing device Mirena is now freely available.
Right, and so
whereas up until now, people have had to pay $340-something to get it. So we're still making things.
What does Mirena do?
Mirena is a contraceptive device that's inserted into the womb.
Oh, okay.
Yep, cool now.
Sorry, but you were talking about more problems with drugs?
I think more problems with drugs and alcohol that young people have to deal with these days as well.
And that can lead to unsafe sex practices, yes, of course.
Yeah.
Absolutely right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I grew up, I was sexually active in the height of the the AIDS campaign, the HIV/AIDS campaign. So
Mm.
never an option me not to use condom.
Yeah.
It really was powerful.
Yes.
When I was in Australia in the late 80s, and they'd really full on ads on the telly.
Yes.
So whoa, okay, yeah.
Yes.
And then I had lots of gay friends when I moved to Wellington, and I was involved in the HIV/AIDS campaign and safe sex and condoms and all of that.
Yeah.
So that's But now you think maybe we're slipping backwards a bit. You think in terms of safe sex practices for young people, or just because of alcohol and drugs and as a rise in unplanned pregnancies?
No,
do you know?
the abortion rate
Okay.
has been going down.
Yep, cool.
And that's largely been because, well, we don't know because nobody's really researched it properly. But the best guess is that it's because of the greater use of implants.
Ah, of course.
And
Okay.
even with a condom and the pill, you've got to remember to have your condom with you.
You do.
You've got to remember to take your pill daily.
Yeah.
But with IUDs and implants and the injection, all of those methods, it's like fit and forget.
It is. And is that the contraceptive of choice for young women now, do you think?
It is
becoming
one of the choices.
Makes sense.
Yes. And for many people, it's an implant into the arm, and gives you up to 3 to 5 years, depending on the implant.
Gosh.
And provided it doesn't cause any bleeding problems, it's actually more acceptable to many than taking a pill every day.
Absolutely.
You have to be quite particular.
You do have to be that kind of person, I guess, to remember to do that. Yeah. That's interesting. So there have been changes, obviously, in access or contraception technology or drugs, I guess. And so do you think there are still challenges we're facing today, or?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah. I think there always will be, and we'll be always looking for better ways and better methods of contraception. Yeah.
It's quite heartening, I guess, that New Zealand looks like we've taken a step forward in terms of access to abortion, but I guess places like America, there's many access or abortion rights are under attack over there. Do you fear for that here, or do you hope that common sense will prevail here?
I think that our general population is becoming more accepting of diversity. I mean, for me, this year being made Senior New Zealander of the Year would never have happened even 5 years ago. And I noticed that it wasn't just for me and my involvement in reproductive health, but there were semi-finalists or finalists. Another finalist in the senior category was a transgender woman. In the youth, we had Wellington young person, Tabby Beasley.
Oh, of course, yes.
She was too. She was a semi-finalist there, and Ken Clearwater, an older gentleman, was awarded for his work with male sexual abuse.
Great.
So I think that in the whole field of sexual and reproductive health, there's no way that a corporate body like Kiwibank, which runs these awards, would move so far if public opinion wasn't there to support that. And that for me is the biggest thing, is not that I personally have won an award, it's that society has moved just that little bit further so that I can receive an award. Yes, I've had some abuse, but mainly it's being positive. And I think that a corporate body who's got a lot to lose will have judged that outcome.
Yeah, that's very true. That's a good observation, actually. I'd agree with that. Well, congratulations on your award there, Margaret.
Thank you.
And it's well received, well received.
There it is up there.
There it is. Ah, true. Nice. Oh, it's beautiful. It's a glass award. Oh, it's lovely.
I don't know that it's glass. I think it's some sort of acrylic.
Or some kind of credit, but it's kind of a contemporary artwork. That's lovely.
Perfectly useless. I would have preferred a vase.
Yeah, true. It could have filled it in, couldn't it? It would have been a vase. That's true. Purely decorative, but there you go. Congratulations. I guess I'm just interested would be, I guess, who have you worked with over the years? What kind of groups, and do these contraception abortion issues differ for different communities, like Māori, Pacifica, Middle Eastern? I guess there's different social values around. I know Samoan is quite often hard to talk about, even contraception, let alone abortion. Yeah.
It's abortions happen in every strata of society and every culture.
Yeah.
And Asians, Maori and Polynesians actually have a higher rate per population than Europeans. And I think in my experience it's been particularly difficult for Polynesian women because they so often don't talk about sex with young people, and those women felt that they were, the only one that this had ever happened to,
true.
because you don't hear about it.
So they don't talk amongst themselves either, the young women,
no.
because it's shameful, probably. Was a big thing.
Yes.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And also the way that they were so fearful about even going to the hospital because there would be a cleaner or a cook or somebody in the hospital, and they would go to mum or dad and say, "Oh, saw so and so in the hospital the other day,"
At the abortion clinic, even. It's when we had the clinic back in the day, of course.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they were fearful of even attending our services.
Of course.
So yes, there were special difficulties with other races.
Yeah, sure. Wellington compares to other parts of the country or the world with regards to our attitudes to, maybe not within other parts of the country, maybe with the world, in regards to attitudes to contraception and abortion.
Well, I think the Masengard report stemmed from here. That's nothing that we can be proud of.
No,
really.
that put us back a bit, didn't it?
Yes,
In terms of that stuff. Yeah.
I spent so many years of hours rather, of my professional life trying to get rid of that
interesting.
regulation that stemmed out of the Masengard report regarding contraception in under 16 year olds. So we weren't ahead of the play there, and interesting that the first abortion clinic happened in Auckland, and that was due to Rex Hunton. He was not an O&G specialist. He was a community physician. He was a specialist physician. And
in South Auckland, perchance? Or
yes, in Auckland. He worked for the Auckland Hospital Board. And the Auckland Hospital Board gave him a task. They gave him a cottage. It was called the Pink Cottage. And he was to advise the Auckland Hospital Board on community health, because that seemed to be a buzzword at that time. And so he and Father Felix Donnelly worked from this clinic, and he reported back that there were two major problems in the community. And one was homosexuality and one was abortion. And that was quite a brave thing for him to do, and quite a forward-thinking thing for him to do. And he was involved in the establishment of the Auckland Medical Aid Centre, and that was started in 1974.
When did Parkview open here?
1980.
So a few years later.
So we were quite a bit later.
Quite a bit later, actually.
Yes, so for a long time we in Wellington had to send our patients up to Auckland. And the same thing with family planning. The first clinic was in Auckland, and that was in, also in 1953, around about the time of the Mason stuff. And we were, I forget when we started, but in Wellington we were a little bit later. So in Wellington we haven't been at the forefront of sexual and reproductive health.
Would you think it's because of the influence of the Mason-Garb report, or just
no? I think it's largely a population thing.
Right.
I think
Okay.
in a bigger population, you've got more people doing this sort of thing.
Yeah.
I think it's just coming from the bigger city.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Oh, I think that's probably all my questions, actually.
Right.
Dame Margaret, thank you very much.
Good.
I guess my final question is, if you could maybe talk about the object you are kindly donating to Museums on Wellington, the Support Safe Legal Abortion protest badge, I guess, wasn't it?
Yes.
So, could you tell us a little bit about that and the symbolism to you, I guess? Or
yes. As I said, I wasn't protesting on the streets in those days. I have changed. I think old ladies can do it, and I'm no longer practicing in the surgery. But in those days, I kept pretty much to be helping them with the doctory side of things. But I did join the Abortion Law Reform Association,
right?
And I also joined WONAC as well.
Of course.
But I didn't go on WONAC protests. And Alran's was a more sedate organisation, and I became the president in 1975. And so I was the president when the abortion legislation went through, and I still feel, that we didn't do as good a job as the opposition. They were drinking partners. Des Dalgety was their lawyer, and he was a partner, colleague, if you like, of Muldoon, and we didn't have that sort of connection, and didn't have I suppose the experience also of
political.
Didn't have enough political sense, and I always feel that I had let the organisation down, if you like, when that dreadful legislation went through.
Right.
But when it went through, as I said, we made it work. And I think that's why it's taken 43 years to change it, because I think if we'd said, no, this is dreadful, well, we did actually, because when the law went through in 1977, the clinic closed, the Auckland clinic closed, and we had to revert back to sending people to Australia, because the law was completely unworkable. And it had a very strict clause in it, which was put in by Dr. Wall, who was a Porirua Member of Parliament, and that was, and the danger cannot be averted by any other means. Well, you can think of all sorts of things that can happen. You can provide people with a benefit, you can, do all sorts of things, and people felt that clause in the law was too restrictive. And also the new system of certifying consultants wasn't working, and people were saying, I've got approval for abortion, but they couldn't find an operating doctor. And so there was a lot of turmoil for the next 7 months. When the law went through in 1977, it was unworkable, literally unworkable. And that was when SOS groups started up. And that's another Wellington group. In Wellington, they called it the Wellington Abortion Trust, but it was exactly the same as all the SOS groups. And once again, it was Auckland who really started that. But Dr. Carol Shand was heavily involved in the SOS group here and was a trustee, and that's another feminist story for Wellington. And that was set up because of that huge gap when the new law came in 1977, and we suddenly had to start referring back to Australia.
Yeah, true.
And that became obvious because there were cartoons about all these plane loads of women going to Australia, and that if that had maintained, if that level had maintained, we would have got rid of that law. Because it was literally unworkable. But
sure.
the Abortion Supervisory Committee, which was brand new, newly appointed, went back to Parliament in July and said, you've got to make these amendments, you've got to remove that ridiculous clause. They didn't say it like that, obviously.
Yeah.
You've got to remove the clause, and the danger cannot be averted by any means. You've got to streamline the certifying consultant system, which no other country had.
Right.
It was a peculiar New Zealand thing,
Right.
doing our own thing.
Yeah, true.
And so that did in fact make the law workable. It still wasn't good, but it was workable. And so we made it work.
Okay.
And that's why it took 43 years to change it, was because we developed the little loopholes, like 98% being on the grounds of mental health.
Right, okay, sure.
Everybody turning a blind eye to that.
Yeah, right. Oh, that makes sense. Want it taken out of the Crimes Act.
Yes.
Okay, interesting. So, Margaret, just talking about your Dame Margaret. So, no, that's absolutely fine. No, you're very interesting. But this, whose badge did this belong to?
It's LRANS.
It's LRANS. So that's
the Abortion Law Reform Association.
That's right, Abortion
And
Law.
I was president in 1975, and we had to do more, campaigning and protest, and we had a poster that went with that.
Right, sure.
As well. And you're welcome to have a poster if you like.
Thank you. I'll make a note of that. Yes.
I wore that. Excuse me.
Feel free to stop at any time.
I wore that.
You did? Yes.
For many years.
That's one of my questions. You did wear it for sure. I see you had a whole bag of them. Did you rotate them around, or were you just collecting them? Did you wear them, or collect them?
Yes, I did wear them, but I also collected them.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, great. Nice. And it was really, really interesting, and found out a lot that we wouldn't have found out otherwise if we weren't talking to you. So I really appreciate your time and giving so freely of your information. And women really appreciate all the work you've done for the reproductive and abortion rights too. So thank you on behalf of all women in New Zealand.
Well, it's my pleasure, and as you can see, I never mind talking about these things. I think it's important that we talk about them.
I absolutely agree. So thank you very much, Dame Margaret. Really appreciate it.